Hello everyone and welcome to Exploring Your Inner Bear with myself and Miss Penelope Lemon Biscuit here, who doesn't really know a lot about the tarot, but still between us we are going to endeavour to teach you some basics, just some basic things you need to know. Perhaps you've just grabbed your first deck and you don't really know what's going on, but you've discovered that there are four suits like there are in a normal deck of cards. Except that the four suits in here are the pentacles or the discs, which are, if you like, each suit is an element. So you've got earth, air, fire, water, and earth is the discs, and they can also represent, as you can see here, money. That's quite important. You've got the wands, which are fire or action. That's the five of wands there, because there's a lot of action happening there, a lot of conflict. The swords. So for example, this one's a court card, the Queen of Swords. So she's holding a sword, as you might expect. But swords are the element of air. And because they're the element of air, they represent thoughts and mental patterns and what is going on in your head. So that's always interesting. When you get a sword, it's like, oh, perhaps my problem is something more to do with how I'm thinking. There's the two of swords there. Two men playing chess, very clever. And I always see that as they're kind of not exactly butting heads, but it's like a little bit checkmate. The two swords, it's very balanced, these two swords here, and it's like, well, what do I do? It can be duality, one thing or another thing, but I often see this card as when you're a little bit blocked, almost like you can't make another move. If you move forwards, there's something here, you kind of can't really make any progress. So what have we done? We've done the discs, the swords, the wands, and then we need cups, which is the emotional stuff. Cups, love, obviously, it's important. The element of water, and there she is sitting by the water. That's the Four of Cups, and in this card she's, as you can see, she's got three cups there. We assume that those are full of something nice, but she's holding the one that's empty. So in that particular card, it's showing you that you've got three full cups, but you're fixated on the one that isn't, but hasn't got anything in it. So there's a lot more to them than you might think. It's not always terribly straightforward. And when you look at whatever your deck is, however the artwork has depicted or interpreted the swords and the cups and the particular, the numbers, they all mean different things. You're going to have a different picture to look at than the one, for example, the Four of Cups in your deck might look very different to that. I've got a brilliant different to that Four of Cups that I can show you in this deck. So you've got a traditional Four of Cups, like I said, three full cups and an empty cup. And then there's my Italian deck, the 78 Doors. You won't see any cups, wands, swords, any of that in the actual design, because what they do is they interpret the meaning of the card. So this idea that you're kind of dissatisfied with what you've got. Actually, maybe you have got things, but you're kind of, oh, I can't be bothered, or I'm just really disappointed and I feel let down. They have interpreted it in a great way. If you have a look at him in front of the telly there, he's clearly been there for some time. The bowls are piling up. He's got a bottle of wine there, remote in his hand, but he doesn't look. He's watching the telly, but you can feel it, can't you? Just sort of like, oh, there's nothing on that I really want to watch, but I'm sitting here with my crisps anyway. So that's the fun thing about the tarot, is that they will all depict these particular things in a different way. But you can look them up online. You can Google it. You can say Four of Cups, and it'll give you a standard interpretation. And from there, it's then up to you to look at your card and go, was I eating crisps earlier? Or whatever it is. Should I give up drinking? Well, you know, to make something of it from obviously your own lens, your own point of view, because you are generally asking about your own life. So the artist doesn't know anything about your own life, but your brain and your subconscious do understand. So they will help you pick the cards and draw out the cards that are meaningful to you and give you the symbols that you need to jog you to, oh, that's what I need to do, or that's what my problem is. So that is the 4 suits. I've gone through the 4 suits there. And then you'll hear people talk about the major arcana with the tarot, and that I have mentioned it already in some of these videos, and that might have meant nothing to you at all, but it is just the word for a set of 22 cards that are outside of the 4 suits that you get. You get your 4 suits all the way from 1 up to King, and then you get these 22 cards which start with the Fool. You probably heard the phrase the Fool's Journey. Well, that comes from the tarot, and the tarot is his journey. So he's often depicted, and traditionally depicted, taking a step off. He's on the edge of a cliff and he's taking a step off the cliff into the unknown, usually got 1 foot in the air. Here's one without a foot in the air, but you get the idea. He's holding a key because this is the Tarot of the 78 Doors. But he's getting ready to make a leap into the unknown. Perhaps he's unlocking the future there. These cards are actually very clever, although they're very different. We've got the Norse Fool. He looks like he's just striding along, no cliff in sight there. Or then you've got my favourite, the Syrian deck, where it's a completely different interpretation. It's saying starseed, the beginning of a life cycle, the beginning of a life. It just looks like a seed almost, doesn't it, coming down to the planet. I think that's a really interesting way to interpret that card. So the major arcana is the Fool stepping off the cliff into the unknown, onto his journey. And on his journey he goes through everything from starting, the next card is the Magician, and you've got the High Priestess, the Empress, the Emperor. They all have, a different meaning. It's the idea that the journey of the soul is going through different stages, so that he would learn something different at each stage of the journey. So with the High Priestess, for example, it's all about the intuition and learning about the inner self. And then you get cards like Strength and Justice, which is all about balance. And it can be all sorts of things. Justice, literally the law. But you go all the way through the deck, and the idea is you move through, the Fool moves through the journey, and he gets to the world, which is the end of the journey, the fulfillment of his desires, depicted here. She looks happy, doesn't she? It's a good card. If you get the world, generally, unless it's upside down, which again we can go into when cards are upside down another time, it's pretty good. So there, it's lovely. In the Syrian deck, it's ascension. So this idea that everything's coming to you. I love that one in particular. So this world card, probably one of my favourite depictions. But the idea is the major arcana is the journey of the Fool from stepping off the cliff all the way through to the fulfillment of his desires. And that can be anything. That could be a small thing like, I want to buy a new car, or I want to move house, or a new job. Or it could symbolise a whole life. So, the tarot can be very macro and micro in that way. So when we talk about the major arcana, those 22 cards will be depicted. They usually have the name on them, or as with the Syrian deck, they've got something slightly different. But they'll usually have the number, and that will give you what number card. You can just about see that's number 21 there, which is the last card. And just a quick note about that. You say, oh, you said 22 cards. Yes, 21 is the last card, the World. But that is because, and I think this is particularly lovely, the Fool is card 0. And I think that's so meaningful, because the circle being without end, the idea that a circle or a 0, it's infinite. The potential is infinite. It's limitless potential. So that's really rather exciting. That's really all the basics that you need to know. Is there's 4 suits. The major arcana is the Fool on his journey. And the other cards are kind of to help you kind of work out how to get there. You are the Fool. And you're trying to get to where you want to go. But there's all sorts of obstacles in your way. And with the tarot, one of the very well-known things about it is you might get the Death card. And indeed, in the Rider-Waite deck, which is the kind of the original, if you like, I believe it does have a skeleton, with a scythe, looking a bit scary. And in fact, here we go. Here's my Italian deck. Here's the Death card. There you go. Look at him. That is Death, isn't it? Really, sitting on the tombstone in his black robe, holding a life timer, an egg timer. And then, of course, you've got the Syrian deck, much different vibe completely, called Transition. And obviously she's leaving her body, going off to who knows where. So these cards depict death very differently. There's the death of the god Balder, if you know Norse mythology. So, people do get very worked up about the Death card. And even in my Light Seers tarot, which is a very sort of uplifting sort of tarot, we have a cowled figure. But then, as you see, in the hood, there's the limitless potential. So the idea of death is that it is a change. So actual death, obviously, is a change from one state to another state. And the Death card comes up very often, really, and you shouldn't be surprised or worried about seeing it. In fact, you should be hooray, because it means there's a change coming. And depending on your situation, change can be a really useful and wonderful thing. If you don't want change at that point, then you may be wanting to ask some more questions and delve a bit deeper. But nevertheless, it's nothing to be worried about. The one other people do get a little bit worried about this one. Here we go, is the Tower. So that looks quite bad, doesn't it? Tower being struck by lightning, man falling off. Yes. I believe I have another similar somewhere here. They're all pretty. Oh, actually, I've got a very different tower for you as well. Because the idea of the Tower card is that everything is coming down. Everything is being reset and remade and sort of stripped, really. And it can be terribly painful and difficult if you resist the change. But actually, it can be a very powerful card to get in a reading. And it can actually be a very positive card to get in some respects, because a lot of people have a card reading because they've got a big problem in their lives. Now, if you get the Tower, it could mean that a lot of things are going to change. And it could be for the better, because if you're in a bad situation, then you do need everything to change. But here is the Light Seers Tower, which I think is lovely. So there you go. It's still a sort of tower shape there. And you've got the squirrel and his nuts, if I'm allowed to say that. But, his little house where he's got his nuts, it's being struck by lightning. So obviously he's a little bit worried about future food supplies. But nevertheless, I think actually that card embodies some of the positive aspects that there definitely are with the Tower card. Because, when something is no good for you or for anyone else, then it needs to come down, So I think that's really all of the cards that I wanted to talk about today. There's plenty more we can go into about the different suits, the different cards. You can get a lot of information online about the major arcana. I may or may not go into them in depth because I think you can do that elsewhere. I think it was important to talk about the Death card because everybody fears that, and the Tower card because those who know about the Tarot go, "Yay, the Tower!" And, you know, just to remember that, you know, it isn't necessarily the end of everything in a bad way. It could be just the end of everything bad, which would be wonderful. Penelope thinks it would be wonderful if Mummy stopped talking and she could get a word in edgeways like fish slice. Order, order! Well, you know, we talk about seeing everything from our own lens. Well, that's my interpretation, but if you look at her little face, she does look perfectly content listening to Mummy drone on. Like I said, she doesn't really know an awful lot about the cards themselves, so she's probably left it to me to tell you that bit. It's just really for people who don't know a lot about the tarot and wanted just to have a little bit of an introduction. But feel free to skip this one if you think you know your stuff. And you better know your stuff. Penelope's saying, you better know your stuff. No, she wouldn't do that. One of my other bears might. But look at that. Look at the little happy face. I think she's just happy to be on camera. Anyway, so I hope that's gone through some of the basics for you. We'll go into how to use these wonderful cards in another video.